Hello, this is Professor Werwath. I wanted to do a quick discussion on AI and product development. This is part of the project management class. In fact, I gave this lecture on February 10th. It was very well received. The question, I guess, that I'm trying to look at is how will AI impact the new product development world as we know it? And my thesis is that it's going to make some radical changes. A lot of what we've written up in textbooks, what we've been teaching as project management for many, many years, in fact, in some cases, decades, will be radically transformed. And the reason being, AI will speed up the process, it will reduce the labor and effort required, it will increase the quality, and it'll change literally how we manage projects and manage portfolios going forward, especially on software intensive products and projects. This is my favorite chart in terms of the life cycle chart that comes out of the textbook we're using this quarter for project management. You can see that the bulk of the effort historically has been in execution. Not only the bulk of the effort, the bulk of the time. Much of what we do in defining and planning is to protect the resources that we use in execution. We have always treated software engineers as the critical commodity that needs to be managed carefully because there's always a shortage. There's never enough software engineers. At least up until the 2020s, that was true. And for 30, 40 years, we protected the software engineers by making sure we had good, solid requirements, good, solid planning. The way we, in essence, if we're going to take one shot at it, it has to be the right shot. And you can see where execution became 60, 70, 80% of the total effort required to get a product out the door. And execution in this case, we're defining as developing the product, developing the code, and testing and validating before deployment. So what do I see happening here? If you take the 7 stages of new product development, really the core of it is stage 5, where we're coding, we're testing, we're validating, right? We're validating inside the lab before we go out into the market. So that's stage 5, and stage 5 was literally, the vast majority of the effort and the time and the risk, okay? What happens when you radically compress the time, effort, and staff required to develop a new product? What if what used to be 6, 9, 12 months can now be condensed into as many days or even half a day? So does step 5 then, I know it changes dramatically, but does it also resequence? Can we now start thinking about product development as a form of initiating ideation, idea screening, and concept development? Can we literally develop the product faster than we can talk about it? Can we develop the product faster than we can specify it? Can we develop the product faster than we can strategize, right? If I can develop 10 products in the time that it takes you to write one requirements document, when I say products, you can think of them as prototypes, right? They're not fully productized. They are definitely something that is more than conceptual. It's not a stick diagram or some sort of one-page summary. This is an actual functioning, working prototype, okay? What happens to overall cycle time? Clearly, it gets compressed. Clearly, we're getting into a world where products can be developed in a matter of days. You can do regular releases. You can do continuous release, right? So every day you're releasing, several versions of software, several versions of the product, if you so choose, right? If you're continually building, you can be continually releasing in this context, right? And AI is the facilitator for the whole process. Some words of wisdom. I'm sure you've heard this before. If you want to go faster, work alone. If you want to go further, build a team, right? What is the new revised words of wisdom in the context of AI, right? In agentic AI, you have agents that are out there, working and doing your work in parallel with your day-to-day tasks, right? So effectively, they're autonomous agents. They're doing what you've programmed them to do on your behalf. They are literally acting in your stead, right? So the words of wisdom might very well change to, if you want both, build a team of agents. If you want to go faster and further, your team is going to be human and it's going to be digital, both, right? You're going to have both, right? And you're going to need to be able to manage both. So as project managers, product managers, our roles change dramatically. We'll be getting into that in a few moments. But the bottom line is More will be expected of you. You'll be expected to be an agentic coordinator. You're going to be expected to be a facilitator of that process. You're going to be able to handle more projects at the same time with fewer people. I know that sounds impossible. It sounds like, wishful thinking on the part of senior management. Maybe some of it is, but AI has that promise. And I think that promise, at least partially, has to be fulfilled by the folks on the ground, folks like you who are building products every day. So the bottleneck, whatever that bottleneck is, the rate limiting process has historically been design, code, and test, right? What happens when this is no longer a bottleneck, but now it's in abundance? You literally have more than you could ever hope for. A 24/7 agent that can develop code for you even while you're sleeping, right? The measures we used in the past to protect those critical resources are now not only unnecessary, they're potentially counterproductive, right? If you're trying to protect the resource that now suddenly is in massive supply, right? You should be leveraging what's in massive supply because everybody else will be, right? What happens when your competition is suddenly using the same tools that you are, right? I asked the question last night with my students, right? Can you think of a technology that went from being expensive and in limited supply to a technology that is now almost zero cost, right? And is in abundant supply. And there's literally an unlimited capability. And even though nobody brought it up, I guess I'll bring it up now. Digital photography comes to mind, right? In my youth, photography was film-based. Film was expensive. The raw film that you would buy typically in a cartridge. And then that film had to be processed. So there's a double cost, the upfront cost of the film and then the cost of processing. In between, there was this time delay of 3, 4, 5 days to get your photographs printed, right? And oh, by the way, you only got one copy, typically one copy of each photograph. So if you wanted additional copies, you had to submit to the processors and they would print out photographs for you. And most drugstores did this. We used to have photomats, which were little drive-through windows that you could bring your camera film to. So yes, this was a whole industry. This was a massive industry. It's been totally disrupted. It's gone. The industry, it's gone. I mean, there might be some remnants of film still left for special applications, but for general use, right? Digital photography has become so ubiquitous that we all carry at least one camera with us at all times. Even children have a camera with them. We use photography. I take pictures of menus at restaurants. I would have never done that before. I take pictures of scenery. I take pictures of my sink when it's leaking so I can send a picture to my plumber. I take pictures of color swatches when I'm at Home Depot so that my wife can tell me what color paint to buy, right? These are trivial, ridiculously, unnecessary photographs. So at least we would have thought so 30, 40 years ago. But now, because it's zero cost, right, we can access it instantly and with no incremental pain whatsoever in terms of time or in terms of money. Knowledge creation, right? AI can only apply knowledge that already exists to differentiate yourself and your company. You need to create proprietary knowledge that AI can't create on its own, right? Science, engineering, tests, experiments, laboratories, ideation, design, create things and answer questions that AI cannot currently answer because it's not in their database. It's not in the public domain. It's not something that is readily available. So this is your value add, at least one of your value adds potentially in the world of engineering and science, and that is to continue to push that frontier forward, right? Answer questions about sodium ion batteries, answer questions about electric vehicles, answer questions about how to do mining in places like Tennessee that's never perhaps done, that kind of mining before, right? Mining and processing and all of the work necessary to rebuild our industries. These are the questions that need to be answered, and AI alone cannot do it, right? Skill shifting, right? What does this mean? To me, it means that we're going to be shifting towards people and resources that are considered AI native. These are people who can work in the AI world readily, without hesitation, with some degree of expertise, with some historical knowledge and understanding of the subtleties of the different agents and tools that are out there. If super specialization is now less desired, what takes its place, right? In other words, if I know fast Fourier transforms, or I know something very specific about robotics, is that still going to be useful in the world of the future when AI can literally bring you that expertise at the punch of a few keys, right? What will then this key skill be needed in the future? And maybe I'm biased because I run the Masters of Engineering Management program, but we talk about the deep vertical expertise that's technical, and then the horizontal expertise that's general in nature, that's more diverse, that helps you understand systems and systems thinking. That combination of vertical and horizontal, right, is what I believe will be needed in the future, right? To translate that to AI speak, I will call that agentic orchestration, right? You have to know enough about agents to be able to functionally operate them, to put in the right prompts in the right sequence, understanding what kind of results you're looking for, and being able to iterate on that, right? That's agentic orchestration in my book, right? And that's one of the key skills that I would consider to some extent kind of a horizontal skill, because you're going to need to know a bunch of different agents and what they're capable of. On top of that, you're going to need to know vertically, what exactly you're looking for as an output that's specific to your company, to your technology, to your industry, right? What does this mean practically? I think careers are going to be starting to collapse, right? The traditional role of product manager, which is really requirements focused, might be just too specialized, right? You might need to combine that with a project management skill and a systems engineering skill and a test engineering skill and an architecture skill. All of these skills, because frankly, you're going to be, whoever succeeds and survives this coming fallout, right, will wind up having to wear many hats and have to be able to coordinate amongst many different disciplines. So that's, again, the horizontal. Does this mean that the era of the specialist is over? Maybe not. There still might be a need for specialists that have skills and knowledge that go beyond what AI can produce on its own, right? But it does mean, I think, that engineering becomes more valuable. And the reason being that we have those technical skills to understand how to make these tools work, as well as the horizontal that gives you a systems knowledge of how business works and how the process works and how to get product out the door, right? Will this mean that teams are smaller and that teams will move faster? I believe it does. I believe teams will be much, much smaller, maybe teams of 1, 2, or 3 people, where we used to have a half a dozen or more, right? We might wind up moving, 5x to 10x faster. There's already talk on the street that CRMs are being developed in a matter of days that used to take, months and months to even create a simple prototype. These are much better than simple prototypes, but don't kid yourself. What's coming out of these, vibe coding tools are not necessarily full-blown mature products, but they are definitely on that product scale. They're more than prototypes, but less than fully releasable products. They're somewhere in between. Okay, agentic orchestration. This is a word that I've used before. What do I mean by it? The ability to solve big problems or big projects, right? First of all, you're going to need to have the skill to be able to break that work down into smaller chunks, what we would call WBS elements, to see the linkages between the chunks, the dependencies, and the shared information. You need to be fluent in the prompting particulars of your agents. You need to know the limits and capabilities of your agents. What can they do? What can't they do? Recognize and discern good quality output from junk. And, sometimes that's not so easy to do. You need to validate. You need to maybe use multiple agents to give you triangulation on a specific task, right? Iterate on your results. Learn which prompts get you the needed result. Learn how the output of one agent might become the input of another agent, right? This to me is agentic orchestration. This is a value add that engineering managers, project managers, product managers of the future, I think, will need this skill. Vibe coding is more or less a no-code, low-code tool that allows even amateurs, hardware engineers, or even lay people who have no coding skills whatsoever to create code from scratch, to create code from natural language, English sentences, English paragraphs, right? These are not products, as I mentioned before. Vibe coding will not deliver you a fully functional CRM like Salesforce. I mean, Salesforce is a cloud-based, SaaS-based CRM, world-class, been around for decades. It's been ruggedized. It's been supported. It is supported, right? It's not just the code itself sitting in the cloud. It is a company. It is a business. It has support infrastructure. It has robustness built in. This is not what vibe coding will get you. It will, however, get you a very good functioning prototype, right? They're not necessarily robust. They're not necessarily reliable. They're not necessarily self-supporting. You should not use these directly in mission critical applications, in my opinion. Now, many of you will differ with this and say, oh, of course I can use this. Great. Until something happens, right? You have to be able to support that product, and you need to be able to have an architecture behind it, right? It can help you create application code in a matter of minutes with very little skill. You can even have interns come into your company and create vibe code, right? In fact, that might be something that's worth looking at, is what would be the role of interns to create, out-of-box thinking solutions, prototypes that might violate certain assumptions in your company, or might experiment with different approaches to looking at the same problem. So if it costs you very little, if not close to nothing, right? Why wouldn't you explore this in terms of seeing how you can solve your customers' problems in different ways? So vibe coding is out there. One of the tools that people talk about is Lovable. My understanding is this is literally a no-code application development environment. So lovable.ai, I believe. So go online, check it out. In fact, I encourage all my students to go out and check out virtually all these agentic AI tools in particular. Start automating yourself, right? Get OpenClaw, which is an open source agentic AI tool. If you're worried about security, get a separate computer, maybe a small Mac Mini or something like that. Run it on your Mac Mini and start automating your day-to-day tasks, your calendar, your bill pay, responding to emails, day-to-day tasks, right? And then start asking how you can do this for others, right? A simple example would be my mechanic, and I used this example last night, but my mechanic, rarely calls me. He knows a lot about my car because he's been working on it for years. He has all my history, so he knows when I need maintenance, what kind of maintenance I need, what kind of problems I've had and never solved, et cetera, et cetera. So the system could be set up with my mechanic if he had an OpenClaw server, if he had an OpenClaw piece of software running against his database. He could literally initiate and be proactive with me as opposed to me being reactive with him, right? I call him when something is smoking or something sounds wrong, or I think I need an oil change. He can literally get me down to the day, saying, you need an oil change on this day. Let us schedule something with you. Let my calendar talk to yours, right? Let's find a time that works for both, and let's get this thing done. So it creates a revenue stream for the mechanic. It makes my life easier because I don't have to think about what my car needs. My mechanic will tell me what it needs and when it needs it, right? And it's trusted because it's based on my history and my database. It's not random. They're not calling me randomly, right? It's based on my history. They know I'm going to hit 5,000 miles on this date, right? And they also know what's been done to my car. So they're not going to ask me to do something that's already been done or doesn't need to be done, right? The bigger question that everyone's debating online is, does SaaS get replaced by vibe coding? Can you literally take Salesforce and code your own CRM in a vibe coding environment in less than a week? And the answer is yes, you can. But recognize that Salesforce is more than a piece of code, right? It might have taken years, if not decades, to be created, but also the infrastructure is there, right? These vibe coding outputs are not products. You need a product that's reliable, that's supported, that's robust, that's efficient, that's cost effective, and that's accountable. And that's what I should have put on this list, is the accountability piece, right? When you hire Salesforce, you have a company that will be held accountable for its delivery and its performance. And your company needs that. In many cases, your company wants accountability. If you don't need those things, if you are literally just interested in a quick and dirty CRM partial implementation compared to Salesforce, then yes, go ahead. Do the vibe coding thing and put in place a CRM that came out of an AI. The problem is there's no accountability. There's no necessarily reliable approach here. There's no support. It's not necessarily robust, and you're going to need somehow to maintain that thing. Maybe the AI that created it can also maintain it, right? And that would be probably the logical next step. So let's talk about consulting for a moment. Let's get away from SaaS, right? So consulting is based on billable hours historically, right? Is that still a viable business model in the world where much of the consulting tasks can be automated through AI, right? I submit and suggest that outcome-based pricing will leverage the efficiencies of AI, right? So both sides will win. The side that's the buyer will be able to say, I got exactly what I wanted at a fixed price that I knew up front and was able to budget, and it was lower than I would have paid a year ago. Okay. The supplier, on the other hand, says, I'm able to deliver it regardless of how many hours it takes me. I know how much money I'm going to make. I know how much revenue I'm going to be incentivized to use less effort and less time and less resource, right? So outcome-based pricing basically benefits both sides, right? And the traditional pyramid inside the consulting firm, which usually at the base of the pyramid were fresh outs, people fresh out of college, right? The junior associates that were going to move their way up and effectively fill out that pyramid over the course of their career. Maybe that's inverted. Maybe that's now completely destroyed, right? Because a lot of the base of the pyramid can be automated through AI, right? So now we've got really people who are leveraging other skills other than their analytic skills, which can be automated now, other than their research skills, which can be automated now, other than their PowerPoint production skills, which can be automated now, and which are automated now. There are going to be a different set of skills, and we'll get into that in a moment. But first and foremost, I believe consultants become strategists, right? You're finding the best path to the desired outcome. You're looking to solve the problem of the client. You're managing that client relationship, and you're determining if the outcome is valuable to begin with, if that even is going to be something that's worth pursuing for both you and the client. So these are the skills that I believe will matter most in this world of AI, right? Human interface skills, emotional intelligence, EQ, selling, managing, and negotiating, knowledge of the applicable AI tools and agents, ability to integrate a variety of tools to create a specific outcome, right? Think of it as, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, everyone was all abuzz about 3D printing. Well, 3D printing and, vibe coding actually have a lot in common. One is software, one is hardware, right? But 3D printing gives you some very, very good, high fidelity prototypes, right? In the physical space. Vibe coding can do the same thing in the soft space. The difference, I believe, is vibe coding is much more time efficient. It can do it in a matter of minutes. Some 3D printing jobs take days or hours to execute. So other skills, big picture thinking, understanding the systems involved, understanding how these systems work, right? The ability to break work down into smaller chunks and to manage that and to orchestrate that. Strategic thinking, right? Game theory. Why do I put game theory here? Well, game theory is understanding if you're in a competitive situation, how the other will react, your competitors, right? The other people in your ecosystem, your suppliers, right? Game theory also helps you understand if you're in a client relationship, how your client will react, right? Anything that requires an interaction with humans, in many cases, has a game theory component to it. So understanding the other, how they will react, and how your actions can have ramifications downstream, right? Business model canvas and design, understanding innovation and technology adoption, technology strategy, business and platform strategy. These are the strategic thinking elements that I don't believe will be readily outsourced to AI. I think that will still be in the realm of the human for some time to come. The career ladder. In the past, we had individual contributors, right? These were engineering. We call this the technical ladder. In parallel with the technical ladder, we had the management ladder, right? And there was often a changeover from one to the other. And many people come to MEM to facilitate that changeover from the technical ladder to the management ladder, right? But I guess the question is, what is the future career ladder now that we are living in a world of AI, right? I submit then much of the technical ladder is going to be diminished. We might still have a need for interns. We might still have a need for experts and principal engineers, but a lot of the steps in between may not be necessary, right? Why? Because AI can automate the basic work, and it's already happening today. Basic software engineering and senior engineering work is already being done by AI to the tune of 70, 80% or more in many of today's major corporations. However, the management ladder has a different tone, as we've been talking about, right? Orchestrating agents, integrating digital and human resources together to achieve the ends and the goals of your client, of your business, of your portfolio, right? So now you'll notice I did not X out the intern, right? Why didn't I do that? Well, here's a supposition, here's a proposition, right? Vibe coding allows you to do rapid prototyping of a variety of different options in your product portfolio. The intern, who theoretically should be AI native, right? That's the assumption here. The interns are AI native, and that could be the moniker that you're trying to earn through MEM or any other degree these days. Becoming AI native, being AI native gives you a certain credibility and credential that you can then leverage to help companies prototype new ideas and new solutions and new products, right? In a very rapid fashion, using tools that are leading edge, like Lovable, like I mentioned before, but also coming in with fresh perspectives that aren't jaundiced by how things have always been done, right? Now, the question is what happens to that intern, right? Is there a role for them in software engineering, or is there perhaps a jump into the management ladder from there? Time will tell how that goes, but I think in general, we're still working out many of these issues here, right? Many companies are still wrestling with how do they incorporate AI into their workflow, and still at the same time, keep the lights on, keep the revenue flowing, not have diminished revenue or margins, make the investments necessary, and make the transition as quick and easy and as painless as possible. One of the fallouts is, guess what? To do all these things, you're not going to need as many headcounts. So headcount is being reduced, and we're seeing that as a facilitator to enable the investment, especially the capital investment that's needed for AI. So the infrastructure that's needed is not trivial. We're talking in many cases billions of dollars. So those decisions are being made. I think this is a very interesting time. Stay tuned for where this goes from here. This is rapidly changing. Be ready to move quickly. Be ready to adapt some of these technologies to your needs, and start playing with them now. There is really no tomorrow, because tomorrow will be a different playground. Take care.